Welcome to a splice of life science marketing, your go-to show for life science marketing professionals in biotech, medtech, and diagnostics. Join us for sharp, strategic conversations that turn cutting-edge insights into real-world marketing advantage. I'm Matt Wilkinson.
And I'm Jasmine Gray. In each episode, we'll cut through the hype and complexity with practical plays you can use to earn trust, stand out in crowded categories, and convert attention into momentum.
Hello, Jasmine. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Matt.
And Happy New Year to everybody that's joining us. Welcome to Season 2 of A Splice of Life Science Marketing.
Woo!
We've lasted this long. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about two articles that we've written recently. One that Jasmine's written called the Janus principle that looks at cognitive offloading and some really interesting insights and a fantastic framework that I know that everybody should be using. And then an article that I've written that really looks into some big predictions for 2026 and certainly some ideas that marketers should be thinking about and paying attention to. So without further ado, dive in.
Let's kick it off.
Jasmine, in your latest article, The Janus Threshold, you argue that product teams in life sciences are at a pivotal moment. We know that AI can scale voice of customer and ethnographic research fast, but delegating presence has a hidden cognitive cost. The promise is really seductive. You talk about how transcripts, themes create really tidy summaries, but the risk is that AI gives you conclusions without the mental activation that makes insights stick and really helps you sort of get under the skin of those insights. You point to evidence that people who rely on generative AI struggle to recall what they produced. And that can translate into a warning for product managers who outsource too much discovery. The punchline of your pieces isn't not to use AI, it's to use AI for volume and post-experience synthesis, and to use the phase framework that you introduce to decide when you must show up yourself. Based on my own experience of conducting hidden needs research, your comment that we still need to go and observe workarounds, observe people in the field and to look at those workarounds that people use, potential contradictions of what they say and what they do, that really resonated with me. Now, one ethnographic project I conducted while working at LGC highlighted just how important it was to visit customers, observe them in their natural habitat, and look for those workarounds, pain points, and contradictions. So before getting too far into this, can you sort of just define a little bit about what you mean by the Janus threshold itself?
The way I look at it, the Janus threshold is the moment you decide whether to be present in discovery or to delegate the presence to AI. So Janus is a Roman god with two faces, and this serves as a good analogy to the product manager needing to look in both directions. Forward at AI's efficiency promise and backwards at what you're trading away by not being there. So if you cross that threshold badly, meaning you surrender thinking, you surrender processing, you surrender reflection, you become what I sometimes call the PM vending machine. Someone who puts in customer requests into that vending machine and outputs features without any transformative thinking in between. And that's a shame. You operationally lose by doing that is human agency in shaping the research itself. Yes, AI executes the plan you gave it. It can pivot mid-conversation, but it cannot pivot mid-conversation. When a researcher mentions an unexpected workaround, when that core facility director actually says that she's running weekend shifts, only a human asks, why? The second thing you lose is pattern recognition across contradictions. When a researcher says they trust your kit and the sensitivity of that kit, but then runs triple replicates on every sample, your brain registers the gap between the words and the behavior. AI captures what the person has said, but it misses what their actions reveal. That contradiction is where insights really live. And the third thing that you have the potential of losing is the one that keeps me up at night the most, and that's the loss of conviction. When you present a strategic pivot based on AI summaries, you sound uncertain because you are uncertain. You didn't live through the discovery. You don't have that firsthand memory of being in the room when that market research is being done or when that voice of the customer is being captured. And you're just reading someone else's, the AI's, field notes. So when you're in a conversation with R&D or with another product manager, that uncertainty comes through, that lack of firsthand experience in the VOC capture comes through.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that without the deep work, we don't actually activate our sort of our mental capacity enough to really then be able to become the expert. It's almost like we're just reading something, and we know we can read something and sort of forget it almost instantly. So you're saying that to really be able to put ourselves in the customer's shoes and to be able to embody them and be able to really represent them, we need to be doing some of that deep work ourselves.
Yeah, there's so many neurological studies that show there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of brain activation that's going on when you're in the room, when you with another person or with a group of people. There's a lot of neural synchrony that goes on in that room that activates thinking, processing, and reflection. And giving that up to an AI summary is actually a disservice to the job that you're meant to be doing.
So I know that you propose a phase framework as part of the article. Are you able to share what that looks like?
Yeah, so phase stands for purpose, hypothesis, action, solutions, and endorsement. It's a quick acronym to help you ask yourself some questions to be able to decide whether it makes sense to have AI be present or whether you should be present. So, purpose, P for purpose. Am I clear on what this research is designed to answer? If you're still figuring out whether some scenario is a real opportunity or just an edge case, delegating that to AI and for AI to be present in voice of the customer is a mistake. H for hypotheses, what assumptions am I carrying into this research? If my hypothesis is that customers are using some kind of kit for a specific type of work in an underserved segment, and I'm wondering whether they pay a premium price for that solution, that's a hypothesis that I need to be present for to test in real time and not abdicate that to AI. A is for action. Is this evidence for a decision already made or evidence that could change the decision? S for solutions. Could this research surface alternative solutions I haven't considered? There's really vital cognitive thinking in being in the room to be able to answer that question that, again, you don't want to abdicate to AI. And E for endorsement. Well, I need to defend these findings in a very deep, detailed sort of way. When I go back to R&D and say, we're not building some sort of instrument or kit or software solution, we're going to build an integrated platform instead because I heard ABC during voice of the customer from 4 or 5 core facility managers. That kind of deep connection of the dots and the ability to defend my position really requires you to be in the room for that.
So I absolutely love that framework. And actually, it brings me to a point where some work I conducted with the University of Leicester last year now, where we'd gone out and we interviewed a number of different organizations. I was in the room or on the calls for all of those conversations. So I was part of the learning process. So I'd already been in the room. But then to go through and actually to conduct the thematic analysis, I was able to use reasoning models to do that markup, to mark up transcripts, and to be able to kind of create those summaries. But because I'd already been there, I was able to check that it was a true representation of what had happened, rather than me sort of approaching it for the first time. So I think it's that, can we use it to do some of the manual, tedious work, but can we make sure that we're doing the really important things? And of course, one of the things about VOC that's so important is actually being in the room anyway and showing the customers that you value them with your time. And so I think that there's the two parts there. So it's to making sure that you're part of that. And when I've been part of those, going in and talking to customers in the past and visiting facilities, I would have loved to have had some of these AI tools that would allow me to generate transcripts on the fly so that I didn't miss any of those quotes. Often ethnographic research is best conducted video and, when you're capturing everything on film, but so many people feel uncomfortable with that. But if we can make sure that we're using these tools to capture more information, then sort of do the downstream analysis, as long as we're present, I get the sense that we're in a really strong place.
Right. So I think you bring up a really important point about being present to continue to build relationships with the people that are providing the VOC, as well as having a firsthand understanding of the discussion from the VOC to be able to check what the AI summaries are giving you back. Because as we all know, there are points of hallucination, there are analyses that it falters on. And if you're not present to have that firsthand experience, you wouldn't be able to check that effectively.
Absolutely. So if we only remembered, one thing from this article, what should it be?
AI can tell you what a customer said, right? It's capturing those notes effectively. Only you, as the product manager, as the marketing manager, can understand what it meant in that context. The difference between a strategic product manager and one with better tools is whether you were in the room when the insight was built.
I love that. And of course, in any role, whether we use AI or not, we're still responsible for the work that we deliver. And so we really should make sure that we're there and we're present for capturing that information and making sure that we really do understand why we're proposing things rather than just outsourcing everything to the AI.
Matt, life science marketers face 6 major shifts in 2026. Buyers now trust peers over vendor claims. They expect websites that answer their questions without friction and use AI tools to find solutions before ever contacting sales. Success now depends on account level metrics rather than lead volume, strategic investment in events with measurable ROI, and measurement systems that track actual revenue influence. The gap between knowing these trends and building the capability to respond will determine who wins this year. What inspired this article? I'm so curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I love to keep up to date with what everybody's predicting for the coming year. What really inspired this was that it's very unusual that everybody's predicting things that sort of correlate so succinctly. So, Forrester, McKinsey, Gartner, and IDC all converged on pretty similar themes, all independently and all within weeks of each other. Maybe that's a sign of groupthink, I don't know, but those 6 themes really hit home, and so I figured it was worth sharing. So they are: trust become our only defensible mode. In the sciences, we know that peer review is the most important form of kind of social proof, followed by key opinion leader recommendations and also your own lab mates and the people that you work with recommending things. We know that poor buyer enablement really does cost deals. So people love to self-serve. They love to scientists in particular, trained to do research in the library, now online, but trained to sort of find out answers themselves. So we really need to enable buyers to come to a sales conversation with a hypothesis. And if we don't give them those tools, we're failing them right from the start. But AI is changing the discovery process. It's not just about content creation, but most people are starting to use AI in actually looking for answers. And while that may not be everywhere across the sciences, it's definitely a trend that's coming in. With these shifts, how people are using AI, It's also changing the way that people are engaging on our websites. We know that we're getting more no-click searches, so people not visiting websites because they've already got the answers. But it also means that we're sort of changing the way that what's known as a marketing qualified lead has become more of a vanity metric. And we really need to be looking at sort of account level engagement, because it might be that one person from a company's gone in, but actually recent research has shown that the buying groups, certainly for bigger purchases, are getting bigger and bigger. And that adds complexity. And so we really need to be making sure that we're getting a view across who's engaging across an account rather than just at an individual level. We know that human connection is really, really important. And so we know that investing in connecting with individuals in target accounts, it really does prove ROI, and it boosts deals as well if you're not doing that effectively. And all of those things mean that our measurement frameworks need to rebuild and look at again. I mean, things like cookie deprecation and other changes to around privacy, as well as sort of AI kind of creating this sort of opaque wall about who's engaging with things, really means that they really need to shift what we're measuring and how.
Yeah, all fabulous points. For me, what resonated the most was the human connection in combination with trust. I'm sure that lots of folks are like you and I, where it's one thing to use AI to do the homework, the background checking. It's another thing to look at websites and read the materials and the data. But it's something completely different to be in front of a salesperson, a field application specialist, and really have the story behind the data and that human connection of that field application specialist using the technology. That to me is irreplaceable.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what resonates the most for you? And could you sort of elaborate on that a bit more?
I think it's actually the fact that so many of the things that we held true in sort of what we might want to call the golden age of digital marketing are kind of coming to an end. 15 years ago, we were sort of hailing the idea that we can email lots of people, that we can get social media to engage with lots of people. All of a sudden, we could reach people in different ways. We could track, we could get ROI off marketing far better than we ever could before. That's kind of disappearing. And I think we're moving into a more complex world. That's there's more channels, there's more opaqueness again. But I think it also means that there's a simpler element to it again, which is now that customers can come to a conversation far more prepared than ever before because of all these tools. We really have to be the sense makers, and it's something that I talked about at SAMPS in Boston. But we really have to bring a point of view. We really have to make sense of what our offer is in the context of our customer. So that means that we have to do our due diligence, we have to do our research onto the customer, we have to get to know their problems, and we have to spend time really understanding what it is that's going to make them successful, so that we can be then building the trust as the trusted partner, not just for providing the right solution, but for providing the right platform for them to be successful. And I think that's the really important thing. They want somebody that's going to not just be here's a kit that works, or here's something that's going to answer this part of the solution. They want somebody that's now going to be able to walk side by side with them and take responsibility for making sure stuff works.
What I'm interpreting from what you're saying is we as marketers at product marketing teams need to go back to the basics of understanding your persona, who your target audience is, understanding their pain points, the gains that you're providing, and telling a coherent story. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think there's then the additive level of this, where with AI, we can now start using those tools to not just tell one story or a few stories based on segmentation, but actually looking down at getting far more targeted with that context and being able to really understand what is going to matter to individual companies and targets, as well as the individuals in them. And I think that then gives us a huge opportunity to use AI, if we do it right, to connect far better with people and make sure that our offers are far more personalized and far more tailored towards the customer itself. So hopefully, if we do this right, we'll be able to use AI to actually do a better job of connecting with other human beings. And I think that's where I would hope that commercial teams in 2026 end up.
Fabulous. What is the one opportunity you suggest someone in marketing or product marketing dig into further?
I mean, we know that marketing's a broad church. So I would look at the thing that is going to make the most difference to the customer. So look at how do you interact most with your customer, whether that's in person at events, whether that's online, and look at those key touch points with the customer and really focus on how can I make sure that with all of this change, we're trying to make sure that we're doing the best possible job for our customer.
So what I've learned in this discussion is we as marketing and sales organizations need to pivot from sort of what was called the golden age of digital marketing to maybe what we can call the platinum age. The platinum age being uber personalization, uber connection, and staying human even with the perhaps foundation of AI behind it all. So that was a fantastic discussion, Matt. Thanks so much. We talked about two areas. One is the Janus threshold and cognitive offloading. And as part of the blog post that I wrote, I created this framework called PHASE that helps product managers and product marketers think about how and when to use AI versus how and when to be present in the room and prevent cognitive offloading. And then you gave us 5 or 6 areas where we should be thinking what 2026 is going to look like and maybe pivot from the golden age of digital marketing into what we might want to call the platinum age of personalization and staying human. Thanks again for a fantastic discussion, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to a splice of life science marketing. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If this conversation helped you, the single biggest way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave a review on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference.
You can find out more about us and the topics we discuss at striven.com or on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you next time.